Hey there, and welcome back to Start Adventuring, a channel dedicated to empowering new roleplayers to break down their barriers and just start adventuring. I'm Baxter.
And I'm Ben. And in this video, we'll be talking about the 3 lessons that we learned running Sarah of Yellowcrest Manor, the 8th chapter of the Candlekeep Mysteries anthology, as a one-on-one, one-shot D&D game as part of our one-on-one shot campaign, where we're learning about adapting pre-written modules for single-session D&D with just one player. We're going to talk about the 3 main takeaways that we had and how you can make this module work best for you at your table if you're planning to run it.
Our first lesson is to use Sarah or the journal in a way that's empathetic to the player characters, meaning that Sarah can be used as a guide to kind of help push players in the correct direction, or the journal can be used as a reference for information that the players may have missed or would need to have in order to have a, vested interest in the storyline.
Yeah, as written, the adventure starts with the players interacting with Sarah. It's not exactly how you wrote your version.
Right.
For me, it started with the journal and getting the information from the journal. But either way, making Sarah a sympathetic character is so important because, information is fine. And to some extent, your players will know, like, we're here going on this adventure. Or like how Baxter set it up, I was a detective tasked with investigating this crime. So I had a, on the surface level reason for doing it, but like giving an emotional incentive to the players to be invested in the characters, it goes a long way. And that's the hardest step to get over at the beginning of a pre-written adventure, because you need it to get going in a certain direction, right?
Right, and this one especially so. But I think that being able to rely on a kind of almost third-party element of it, of, Sarah's ghost or the journal or something that might have a similar motive to the player characters, only will help them in kind of getting themselves out of narrative holes they may have dug themselves in or worked their way past.
Pointing them also back in the right direction, especially if you're on a timeline like we are when we run these as single session adventures. Having, little traces of Sarah to pop up and, remind the players like, oh no, you're trying to help Sarah and she wants you to go that way. The second key takeaway or lesson that we took from this adventure is make use of travel between places. This is a common occurrence in a lot of these Candlekeep Mysteries. You've got multiple locations. Right. If you've got to dump lore or something, or you've got to kind of remind the players of what's going on, like this adventure, for example, has 3 separate locations written into it. Yeah. The library, the first village, and actually it's got 4, right? Because it's Candlekeep, Waterdeep, the village outside of Waterdeep, and then the final temple. Obviously, running it as one session, Baxter cut out locations and condensed the storyline. But if you're running it as written, or even if you're running a shortened but not quite as shortened as we do it version, using travel between the places to reintroduce information, or like we did it at the beginning, we're traveling to the manor, introducing up front the journal and the information, getting the players into it, that's key, right?
No, totally. I think that in terms of that gap in between, what I would call almost a stage change or a phase change, right? I think my example of this and it's kind of one of the weirdest constructs of the way that it was run, or I guess the way that it played out more specifically in ours, was that time where you were mind controlled walking to the dock. You and I talk about it where, it would have been cool if during that time I would have maybe had you commune with Sarah, and maybe get a little bit more of the explanation of what's going on from a first-party source that you have also been kind of in contact with. And using just whatever time you have to help flesh out any missing story pieces, without making it so much that it feels like no matter what the player character did, they would get this information. Do you know what I mean?
Right. And it's especially true because you don't necessarily have a ton of time to dwell on travel.
Right.
So really narrowing down, like, what's the one key thing that tells the story of going between these locations or this scene change or setting change? You know, what's the one key event that gives more information or helps guide the story forward?
Our third lesson is that this adventure really benefits from having a cool, unique boss fight at the end. So as much time as you can prep in something cool and interesting for that final climactic scene, I think the better. Even the way that mine kind of worked out, I'm happy with it. I think I would have maybe liked to do a little bit more in terms of intricate design. And maybe not have had such a heavy dependence on the location for it to start. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, it does kind of fit into how it is as written, because
True.
in the actual module, it takes place in this temple, and there's this ritual going on that you're trying to stop, and maybe you can stop it before it happens, and it's a pretty cool encounter. And you did something similar, but because you condensed the story, it was happening in this, secret location at the manor, and it was slightly different what the, bad guy was, because it was more interesting to you, and just kind of
shaking it up. Yeah.
Right. But I think it also plays into the idea that this adventure is really good for setting up a cool, like, campaign villain, right?
Yes, yeah.
Like, whether it's that you have, Lord Yellowcrest worshiping this old god or whatever, and now that old god, he gets away, or his overseer guy gets away. And now, if you're planning to have this adventure potentially turn into a longer campaign, the cool boss fight can, like, really up the stakes for your player or your party,
right?
To be like, oh, that was cool, and we want to do the next version of that, right? Or if it's a one shot, cut out the other combat and just make one cool combat encounter.
100%. Yeah, I think that this adventure specifically lends itself really well to one combat being the kind of pinnacle, the climax of the adventure, being with whatever you have deemed is the root cause of the dilemma. It's similar to Deep and Creeping Darkness, in some ways similar to Book of the Raven, where it's kind of almost like you're undoing this puzzle box to get, or even Shemshime to that.
Yeah, 100%.
You're undoing
many
this
of these
mysteries. Yeah.
And it's just a fun structure for a one-shot, honestly,
Sure.
Especially a mystery one-shot, right? You're doing this investigation, you solve the puzzle, and you open the door, and you get the big cool fight. I mean,
right.
Because it is Dungeons & Dragons at the end of the day. There are other systems for running just straight-up investigation stories. This is a heroic fantasy, and especially considering that this is a higher-level adventure, or at least it's designed for higher level. Although, again, you could scale this to be a level 3 adventure that leads into a larger campaign if you feel comfortable with, that level of combat tuning.
Right. I feel like so many people ask, like, what's the best way to scale? And honestly, in my, sublimited experience, it's taking health numbers and playing with those. AC can come into play. But really, it's just about finding that balance of, not quite doing as much damage as the PCs, while having maybe a little bit more health so that they can survive a little bit longer. But the thing is, there's also something to be said with the way that we have done this, and that it's a one-on-one. Literally, that's how the boss fight ended up being, a one-on-one fight. Quite one-sided, frankly, from the
right, that's also just the Battle Master maneuvers and all the fun stuff that I was excited to dump on, But the other thing is, too, it comes down to mechanics. Beyond just, like, what's the stat block of the monster that you're running, there's a cool template in the, module for different things that are going on. There's this ritual you're trying to stop. Maybe the Lord is trying to get away and you've got to stop him. Like, the encounter designing a cool encounter is less about what monsters you're picking and what stats they have, and more about what are the stakes dramatically,
right?
And what's the danger to the PCs. I think, not to dwell on other adventures during this, but we mentioned Shemshimes, like dropping the thing in Shemshimes, right? You have to do that to beat that boss. It doesn't necessarily matter about fighting it in a one-on-one sparring match. So making a cool encounter that's sort of complex in that way is more important for this, and for any like boss fight,
right?
That's more important than the stats.
100%. I think in a lot of the times when I design boss encounters, I think, how can I keep the fight from being play turn by turn? I want to attack X, they want to attack me, because that's what creates, in my opinion, interesting kind of design elements to it.
Especially in a one-on-one setting.
Correct, right, or in a small group setting, for sure.
Thanks so much for watching this video. If you found these lessons helpful or interesting, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so you can follow along with the Candlekeep Mysteries one-shot campaign and all of the other interesting projects that we're working on. We're focused on homebrewing and positive D&D, having fun, making it your own. And if that sounds like fun to you, subscribe. We'd love to have you be a part of the channel.
Yeah, and if you guys want to go that extra mile, we do have a Patreon. And if you guys enjoy these videos specifically, the Patreon is a perfect place for you. We have hour-long discussions about each of the chapters every week, how we felt about running them, kind of our process. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, head on over to that Patreon.
And let us know what you think of this adventure, if you've run it or if you're planning to run it. Let's talk about it in the comments down below. We'd love to hear from you. But that'll do it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. We're happy to have you. Always are. And until next time, I'm Ben.
And I'm Baxter. And remember, start adventuring.
Just start adventuring.